very gentle and amicable guy. He's saying, "Oh, he's 2 minutes late, so let's start."
I'm English, do you know?
Hey, you're on time.
How you doing?
Hey, good.
Last time I wasn't in your office.
Thank you.
We were talking about that. Well, the IDB is playing a very important role, so I want to introduce you.
How are you?
Hi, I'm Mexico at the IDB.
Oh, nice to meet you.
How's everything with your PR here today?
Yeah,
It just comes through.
no, we're working very well with
It's like it's a comprehensive.
Yes, of course. He's an old friend of mine. We worked together in the 90s.
He is fantastic. We just came back from 1 week in Colombia. We had the executive directors. There.
Brilliant.
It was great. We're President Santos.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
See him in New York.
Good. Yes, we're going to be there.
¿Listo?
Great seeing you. Sí, ya. César, qué gusto verte. ¿Cómo estás? Bienvenido. Bien, ahí vamos a todo dar. Bien, a todo dar. Sí, te mandé una invitación que andabas por acá, entonces dije, bueno, pues a ver si te animas, pero que te digas ya.
Sí, sí, sí.
Great.
How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming. I think we're missing one. Who are we missing? Henry Gentana. Or is it under one of these? He can't see. Yeah, but we're still missing one. Uh-oh. And it's, I'm gonna go print one really fast. I'll be right back, okay? No hay como dónde poner el vaso.
Yeah, there's a clicker that you're
Okay. Yes, Dan Sean of Resources for the Future. We met a couple of months ago. We exchanged email a few weeks ago. Hey, are you Victoria?
No,
No?
Victoria's not here, but
John Running.
I'm
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, but do you need something?
I'm all set.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which seat is mine? I'm just to put my stuff down.
We're gonna get you your name tag, but you can sit wherever you.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Ya, por eso se mueren las mangas largas. Sí, definitivamente está. ¿Eh? A la mesa. ¿Eh?
Bueno, falta un placard.
Dos. ¿Falta uno o dos?
Lo canceló en Drive. No lo estoy poniendo. Línea.
Yeah, I thought they were outstanding too. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes we can request the presentations and. But
Great, thanks.
Sure.
Is the video going to be available online?
yeah, that would be, so all relevant documents and videos will be at the Mexico Institute website, which you can. So we'll update the website between today and tomorrow. So to be safe, I will tell you like next week the video will be available. Sorry? Yeah, I mean, if I can ask if they can expedite the process, but yeah. Actually, yeah, I will be lying places 1 hour after.
Alright, so the slides will be uploaded. Yes. I confirmed that earlier, right?
Yes. Oh, did you move this here?
Yeah.
Ah, okay, perfect.
Do you need to move one chair because one comes.
Yeah, let's do that. And then let's fill the water glasses with water. Can we fill the
Yep.
glasses with water?
Do you know who's
Who's the glasses?
No.
Didn't
Not
check.
sure. Oh, question. Does the blue help more than having the white like slide there?
It looks better, but if it's just a slide for, is there a PowerPoint?
No, they're powerful.
Okay,
Should I
yeah,
paint
it's
the
better.
flags during the... It looks good. This will look good on TV. Yeah. It's like the moon landing. Nice. All good?
Yep.
This will probably look a little longer.
Yeah, yeah. You too, right? Yeah. Where are you going in? Where you going? Okay. That's not too bad. I'm here. 4 hours? Yeah.
I emailed it to him.
Longer than a day or?
Perfect.
Sure.
There we
That
go.
was good. Oh, good.
I don't know who's going first.
Okay.
Do you come to watch it?
Okay, great. And we have.
No. I came to watch it all the time. Okay.
There's a clip. Yeah, there's a clicker.
Henry, I just
Yep.
Okay. Wow.
I was in charge of the, at that time I was working for them,
Uh-huh.
and I was responsible for the changes.
No, it's color on here.
Year 2000,
Yeah.
there we go.
Okay.
They made a lot of
The world is gonna end.
You're there, right?
Nothing happened, but I'm responsible for all America, all South America.
When Mr. Turner was out, I don't know what order they're going in. If there's
that was my last
Great.
experience.
Cool. Okay.
No,
I am. Enbridge?
I was responsible for the booking process.
Ah, okay.
I've been on almost all my life.
Okay.
Except for 7 years that I was loaned to the police.
Okay.
So I worked for 50 years.
Okay, well, which makes sense when you see your background.
They would try to have a lot of loans.
I was gonna say you can't probably get more rigorous training than
No,
for your physics.
they needed some type of problem.
Yeah.
Elements come together. Originally, I was making money, I was going to be for 2 years. It's published a system. They provided like payments to me. At that time, it was about 120,000 people. So to do that in 2 years is something that was. It took 7 years to do it. And we were able to bring accident rates from 6 accidents per million hours to 0.9.
Is it?
Under our constitution.
That's incredible.
You know, that's down a lot. But,
Federal role.
and then I went back to
Yeah, there are lots of federal
Okay.
departments.
and I retired about 6 years ago.
Okay. You're still on the circuit.
Oh. They didn't have anyone else to talk to. So they said,
Right.
Good, how are you?
Have you been in the reforms in Mexico, or how do people feel about it?
well, I think that I don't understand everything looks all right. But
Something connected with the US.
it was on the 2000.
Quick question.
Yeah.
People got
I don't know if the placement impact.
Yeah, no, I'd like to go.
and now you say, well, you are good to go.
Hi, Henry.
You need to be here.
I expect you'd be
And
loud as well. Wave those palms.
Mexican version of your candidate. No?
Yeah. No,
It's a big deal.
no, actually, it's been very light.
CFE, the electric company, is paying half of it.
That's great. For all of us, and we're going to be a little more retired than previously.
You have a tool, you have to move from here to here. You have a machine, you have to move from here. But that machine is tied to pieces. It's not that important.
So you might want to buy or sell your share.
I think they're trying to acquire.
Good answer. No.
Big deal.
And that's an assumption, right? That
Right now, if it can come down because gas is, if it doesn't, it's gonna really depends.
Nothing about it just feels,
Yeah.
you know,
we look at all technology. And so forth.
You work on the site.
yeah, it has its episodes.
This
I'm
is,
not sure what that means.
so it's been there about 8 years. It feels like a new degree every year. Just with all there is to learn.
Mr. Fernandez?
Yes.
Hi, Laura Dawson. Nice to meet you. I'm by process of elimination. You're not Patrick, you're not John, you must be Mr. Fernandez. Welcome. I'm going to be moderating. We'll have about 10 minutes of remarks.
It really has, yeah.
And they're just moving them all.
The other thing is, I have a feeling my person will say security. I think it's security.
Oh, okay.
I don't like it.
Okay.
I see the figure.
Good.
before.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Wouldn't normally make that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Are we on? All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you're milling near the door, mill towards some chairs. And if you're a panelist, come on up.
I guess not.
No, he's not.
Who's here?
But he's not speaking.
No?
No.
Why? You took him out?
Something.
That's the patience.
Raphael. Gentlemen, welcome back. You can tell this is an important event because we had the brownies at the coffee break. For the non-important events, it's just a little dry biscuit. But if you're very important to us, we give you brownies. Thank you for coming back to oil and gas is fine. You dig it up, it flows, it runs the cars. But this is the magic part of the panel. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, the best part of going to the Science Center was when you could touch the electricity ball, static electricity ball, and your hair would go crazy. And a few years ago, I was lucky enough to go tour the James Bay hydroelectric facility in northern Quebec. And standing on top of that mountain, basically on top of the world, and watching this, the power lines, the energy transmission lines from the top of the world in Quebec, and knowing that that was going directly to Boston, to all parts of the East Coast was just incredible. I mean, it's the real magic stuff that our economy and our livelihoods are based on. So I got the Harry Potter group, the alchemists, here today, and. We've got a lot going on in the energy sector. We've got a clean power plan. We've got questions about interconnectivity of grids. We've got issues, of course, of cybersecurity. We've got issues related to the social licensing in the building and distribution of renewable production. All the greatest hits are here on this panel today. And we've got a great set of representatives. Unfortunately, Eduardo Andrade is not able to join us, so our colleagues will have to make up for the gap. We're sorry about that. We will start in the order that it's in your program, not necessarily the order that our speakers are sitting here. So I'm going to call first on my Canadian colleague, Patrick Brown. Patrick Brown is Director of U.S. Affairs at the Canadian Electricity Association and manages the association's engagement on U.S. legislative, regulatory, and policy processes, and assesses the potential impacts of U.S. public policy on CEA members. He has done many great and wonderful things and held many important positions, all of which you can read about in his bio. Also joining us, we have Mr. Rafael Fernandez. Rafael Fernandez is a consultant on energy and security matters. Safety matters. Security, not yet. Safety matters. He doesn't carry weapons. Safety matters, and the former corporate director for industrial safety and environment protection at Pemex. He is a member of the Academy of Engineering in Mexico, and previously he worked for Bechtel, a global engineering company in Los Angeles. He also has held many, many important and worthwhile positions and has an incredibly rich background. We also, to my left, have Mr. Henry Gentinar. I'm sorry, am I pronouncing that right?
Gentinar.
Gentinar. Welcome, Henry. He's a co-founder of Mega Solar, a Latin America-focused energy services company, where he is managing partner. Prior to Mega Solar, Mr. Gentinar was an operating advisor at a private equity firm, Pegasus Capital Advisors, in New York, and chief marketing officer at Zero Base Energy, the, wait for it, world's leading developer of on-site point-of-use energy products, a company which he also co-founded. Wow. And finally, to his left is Mr. John Renahan. John is the Director of Strategy for GE Power and Water, one of the world's, nobody's heard of GE, I don't have to, one of the world's leading suppliers of power generation and energy delivery technologies. He joined GE in 2007 as part of the Renewable Energy Leadership Program, where he served in roles including wind operations, solar product line, commercial operations, and European solar development. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all for attending and participating. Let's let the magic begin, and each of my panelists is going to deliver remarks for about 10 minutes or until I get the hook. Patrick.
Excellent. I understand there's a clicker for the...
That's a very good question. There's a clicker.
To your right on the podium.
Thank you. This is the wand.
Great.
You can
Thank
speak
you very
from
much.
there or speak from the
I'll just sit right here if that's all right. I am going to say that's the most poetic introduction to the James Bay hydroelectric facilities I've ever heard. So I'm going to relay that to the folks at Hydro-Quebec. I'm sure they'll be thrilled. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. Just a quick word about my association. We are the national authoritative voice of the electricity sector in Canada. We have a very diverse Big Tent membership consisting of provincially owned, vertically integrated utilities, investor-owned utilities, independent power producers, independent system operators, and local distributors. For today's remarks, I thought I'd structure them along the following lines. First, I'd just like to set the stage, provide some brief background information on the U.S.-Canada electricity relationship. I don't mean to insult anyone's intelligence. I'm just not sure how familiar you may be with the actual deep level of integration between the two countries' electric power systems. And then I'll share some thoughts on some of the key challenges and opportunities facing the sector in a larger North American context. Some themes I plan to raise along the way are the need to play to our strengths in terms of leveraging this integration and taking a broad North American view to some of these challenges where it's appropriate. And also the need to choose the right mix of policy options, whether we're combining legislation and regulation where it's appropriate, and then also pursuing other partnerships, other tools where different solutions are required. So just to begin, I'm going to rifle through these pretty quickly. Just to give you a sense of the level of transmission interconnections in Canada, this slide does a really good job of that. You'll note in terms of cross-border connections with the U.S., you're looking at just about 36 transmission physical interconnections spanning the border. There are also numerous interprovincial interconnections, and there's some really interesting discussion going on these days in Canada about how to better expand and take advantage of those opportunities. This next slide is more of a bird's eye, 30,000-foot level of the spaghetti plate of high voltage transmission lines crisscrossing the continent. I would emphasize here, really there are lines of lower voltages that are not reflected here, and the plate would get a lot more messy if those were reflected. This map shows the robust cross-border trading activity that occurs between the U.S. and Canada, and also the major trading hubs across the border. This graph does a really good job of putting cross-border electricity trade into a historical context. Certainly, it's the case that Canada has been a large net exporter of electricity to the U.S. over the past few decades. And what makes all of these connections, integration, and trade possible is adherence to a common set of rules of the road. And I'll be returning to some of those briefly in a moment. And then finally, as a last bit of background, this slide juxtaposes the respective supply mixes in place in either country. A couple of things I'd flag here. You'll note that for Canada, already 80% of our electricity mix is non-greenhouse gas emitting. And that's a major competitive advantage in our view, and not just for Canada, a theme I'll return to in a moment as well. One thing, I mean, we could dwell on these two pie graphs for a whole panel, particularly bearing in mind that these pie graphs are not static. consistent with some of the themes you've heard this morning, there's lots of transformation going on in the electric power sector in terms of the shifting resource mix, greater share of natural gas in the U.S. mix in particular. So I'm not going to talk too much about that, but I think that is worth highlighting just as a backdrop for the conversation for this panel. So with that background context in hand, what does all this mean in terms of the benefits that integration affords us? In CEA's view, these generally fall into 4 different buckets. The first one being reliability. So if you plug into your neighbor's system, you get a lot of benefits along the lines of operational flexibilities, diversity of supply, and then assistance in terms of riding through emergencies or contingencies that may arise on the operational side. Secondly, affordability. There's ample evidence out there to demonstrate that imports of electricity from Canada maintains downward pressure on costs for U.S. consumers. And then, of course, in the standalone Canadian context, we enjoy some of the lowest, most affordable rates in the developed world, and we aim to keep it that way. Thirdly, emission reductions. Quite simply, our system is cleaner because it is a shared system, especially with imports from Canada helping to displace greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. And then finally, there are lots of great examples of the kind of synergies we derive from cross-border integration in terms of optimizing and supporting the development of new renewable resources. There are lots of examples I could point to here. Certainly in the Manitoba, Minnesota context, the exportation of electricity from Manitoba is critical to plans for supporting the integration of new wind resources in the U.S. Midwest. And just as a brief aside, CEA believes it's very encouraging that you're starting to see much greater, much more visible recognition of the types of benefits which are up here on the screen, particularly in major U.S. policy initiatives. In this regard, I'd highlight the Quadrennial Energy Review, the Clean Power Plan issued by the EPA last month, energy legislation that's being debated in Congress. You're seeing a lot more recognition of opportunities for coordination and planning between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And of course, the kind of dialogue that's occurring these days amongst North American energy ministers. So with that context in hand, I'll just briefly turn attention now to some of the major shared challenges and opportunities that are facing the sector in the North American context, beginning with infrastructure investment. As you may know, in both countries, we are in the early stages of a historic cycle of new investment. Canada and the US are looking at hundreds of billions of dollars needed to renew, replace, and modernize electricity infrastructure. And a blend of factors is driving these needs. Whether we're talking about the simple fact that a lot of infrastructure is reaching its end of life, or the kind of pressures we're seeing policy-wise or public-wise for new sources of clean energy to come online. So an endeavor of this magnitude is not without its fair share of challenges, and certainly not the least of which are regulatory impediments, permitting delays that are still in place, shifting expectations on the part of the public, especially customers who want greater control over their energy use, stakeholder consultation becoming much more complex, and of course the enduring question of who pays at the end of the day. In terms of putting some ideas on the table about how to tackle these challenges, we'd offer the following. In Canada, we have seen some very promising forward movement through the government's Responsible Resource Development Plan, which modernized a whole suite of legislation and regulation governing major energy infrastructure project development. We think there's still more action to be taken, particularly looking at cross-border alignment and harmonization of certain rules. This is also an area where we need to take a very broad interjurisdictional view. That applies on the US-Canada side, where you see lots of projects currently in the queue. Also applies on the interprovincial side in Canada itself. Interprovincial trade and integration has historically been quite minimal, but we're starting to see many provinces revisit possibilities here. And the recent release of the Canadian Energy Strategy by provincial premiers in Canada is a really good testament to that fact. And it seems like there's some early momentum that's generating. Another trend we're starting to see is more unique, innovative partnerships with new groups for project development. And this includes, in the Canadian context, equity partnerships between utilities and First Nations. And then finally, there's a lot of evidence, recent evidence, to signal that there's a strong appetite for cross-border investment. Some of the deals I would highlight here include the recent announcement by Halifax-based utility Emera to acquire Tampa-based TECO Energy. And last year as well, Berkshire Hathaway acquired the largest transmission owner in the province of Alberta, Altalink. So making sure that both countries keep the doors open to this kind of investment is very critical moving forward. The second challenge and opportunity I'd highlight is the imperative to act on climate change. And certainly at CEA, we're very proud of the fact that the electricity sector in Canada is the only major economic sector making significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. And in view of the low emitting profile of our sector, we're quite confident that greater integration across North America will really maximize the potential for clean energy. With the Clean Power Plan released last month, it is worth noting that the rule does positively recognize the emission reduction benefits of imports of energy from Canada. We certainly applaud the EPA for making this recognition. And certainly one issue with the Clean Power Plan that will be interesting to watch is whether it induces the expansion or creation of regional carbon markets, and whether there will be opportunities there for linkages with Canadian subnational jurisdictions, as we've seen in the context of Quebec and California entering into a common carbon market. Certainly there's great progress at the state level too. California just updated its renewable portfolio standard. There's recognition in there of the role for out-of-state generation, including Canadian resources. And certainly there's a very lively conversation going on in New England right now about looking at more opportunities for importing hydropower from Eastern Canada. And just one final word on emissions reduction. We're very bullish on the prospects for electrification of transportation, and we see lots of possibilities for US-Canada cooperation there. And so the final challenge and opportunity I'd highlight is germane to reliability and security. Certainly you're probably aware that the risk and the threat landscape out there is evolving. It's increasingly sophisticated. So it's warranting lots of close attention and cooperation by both countries. Thankfully, here in North America, we have an excellent foundation for action on these risks and threats through the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. Very instructive these days to see greater interest in how Mexico might fit into the NERC framework. NERC is it's an exceptional bilateral success story, and it's clear that it's developed a robust record for achieving high levels of sustained performance in the bulk power system. That said, NERC standards can't address everything. They can't address every risk and challenge out there. So other solutions are needed, certainly better information sharing between government and industry, and also government to government, and more effective, more nimble partnerships along the lines of certain forums that we're starting to see established and mature, like in our sector, the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council, which is winning a lot of accolades for a model type of approach to government industry partnerships in tackling these challenges. So there are lots of other things that we could talk about, changing resource mix, innovation and technology, but I hope that's a useful framework, and look forward to talking further during the Q&A.
That was great. Thank you, Patrick. That was terrific. And you kept within Quasimodo's bells limit almost. I appreciate that. You got a lot in a short period of time. Terrific. Next, I'll ask Mr. Fernandez.
Yep. Good afternoon.
And we have a clicker for you.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to talk about nuclear. This is the first time I hear the word nuclear in the meeting. That's normal. Nobody, even though 18% of the electricity in the United States is produced by nuclear, 16% in Canada is produced by nuclear. I don't know why it's not very common to talk about what's going with the nuclear industry in the States or in Canada. In this case, I'm going to talk about nuclear industry in Mexico. I worked for a nuclear station for almost 30 years. I was in charge of engineering, then construction, and then operation of the only nuclear power plant that we have in Mexico, that is Laguna Verde. How do I manage this? Oh.
Got it in one.
Yeah. We are celebrating this year 25 years of commercial operation of the Laguna Verde nuclear power plant. It's the only nuclear power plant in Mexico. It has been running around 90% capacity factor during the whole life without any significant incidents and producing clean, safe, and reliable operation. It supplies between 3 and 5%, it says 3.5, no, 3 or 5%, between 3 and 5% of the total electricity in Mexico. It consists of 2 boiling water reactors, 675 megawatts each originally. They were uprated to 810 megawatts 2 years ago. And right now we have a lifetime extension permit in progress. With that, we can expect the plant to last for another 20 years at least. No? What's happening in Mexico? In Mexico, the electrical demand is expected to grow about 3.5% per year from now to the year 2029. That means that we will require about 60,000 megawatts of new capacity to fit the new demand and the obsolescence of all the plants that we have to remove from the system, no? The plant retirements. The Undersecretary talked about the Prodecer, that is the planning that the government does about the electric future. This is the new plans that are included in that program. From down there is very difficult to see, but it's interesting that they're considering 2 types of plants, what they call the clean plants, that includes wind, geothermal, hydroelectric, nuclear, solar, and efficient cogeneration, and the conventional, that is coal, combined cycle, internal combustion, etc. What is important here in that is that 12,000 megawatts of wind power are scheduled to be installed from now to 2029. That's a lot for a system like Mexican system. It's a lot of wind power for a system. No? It's nice. No, going to have a lot of clean energy coming from wind, but it has special challenges to meet having all that wind power in a system. And something else that is very interesting, it has to do a lot with the other talk that we have this morning, is that we are going to have 26,500 megawatts of combined cycle units. That means gas. It's a lot of gas that will be required to make these plants work. And as we mentioned it was mentioned before, Mexico is an importer of gas. So what we are saying here is that we are committed ourselves to import a lot of gas in the future. No? And that's what's important to me. It includes 4,070 megawatts of nuclear. Out of those 4,000 and something megawatts, 220 have to do with the power uprate that was done to the Laguna Verde station. And it includes 3,850 megawatts of new nuclear. No? This means some three units, 2 units, 1,225 megawatt units. Why that special number? I don't know. It could say 1,000 megawatts or 1,200, but 1,225 megawatt units is like very specific. I don't know why. One in 2026 and the other in 2027. And then one 1,400 megawatt units in the year 2028. At the end of 2029, will represent about 8% of the total electric generation in Mexico. The siting for the units is not very more complicated because the two first units can be installed in the same Laguna Verde site, so we will use a lot of the infrastructure that is there, especially all the studies that have done in the site. The problem will be the other one that we have to look for the new site, most probably would be in the north part of the state of Veracruz and the Gulf Coast of Mexico, or in the state of Sonora, to be able to supply electricity to the Californian peninsula and all that northwest area of Mexico. Here the thing is that to build 3 units, if we don't have a nuclear program, doesn't make too much sense. No? In order to build nuclear, you have to have a nuclear program that will help to create infrastructure in engineering and Mexican infrastructure in engineering and construction, will develop Mexican industry, and would allow technology transfer from the reactor vendor. No? When we built Laguna Verde in the 80s, a lot of big companies in Mexico learned how to work with quality assurance systems and all the requirements that are there for nuclear. And that helped them to improve the possibilities of exporting their goods. So we feel that if we have a nuclear program and not only independent units, will help to the industry to be certain and invest in technology to provide goods for the new plants. Why nuclear? Well, first things, there is a commitment in Mexican government to have 30% of the electricity in Mexico coming from clean energy. And nuclear is considered here as part of the clean energy portfolio. Mexico has very good experience in nuclear. We have, as I mentioned before, 25 years of operation of the Laguna Verde station without any big issues. We just had a power upgrade. We increased the power from 675 to 810 megawatts, and do a lot of the plant improvements. And it was proven that still we have enough people trained to work in nuclear. To work for nuclear plants requires very specific and defined talent that you have to have in order to be successful. Nuclear is economically competitive. It's the only non-fossil generation for that works in the base part of the load core. It will improve national energy security, especially if we are importing so much gas. You have to have something. You cannot put all the eggs in just one basket. This would allow us to diversify a little bit the electrical system. And it will help to support the intermittences of all the wind and solar installations. What is needed? What are the requirements? And what are the problems in having new units? First, nuclear requires a very high investment. No? Nuclear power plants are very capital intensive, that have a long recovery time, and then the cost of money is very important. There are a lot of studies that show that if you change it's very sensitive to the interest rate. No? If you change from 6 to 8, the interest rate of the solution of the problem just changes quite a bit. And so in order to do that, you will require to have new and innovative investment schemes. You know, the way we have built power plants in Mexico, especially in the government side, it's very tight. And to build a nuclear power station with that scheme would be almost impossible. So we will require new schemes in which probably the private investors can work in the construction part of the plant. The Mexican Constitution says that the nuclear power plants can only be operated by the Mexican government or Mexican government utility, but doesn't say anything about construction. No? So most probably one way to go around would be to have a private construction and a government operation. As you saw the dates that we have, the schedule we have for those units is very tight. No, they are talking about 2027 and 2026, 27 and 28. That means that it really we want to have nuclear power stations. We have to start working now. No? This is normally a plant you can build it in 4 or 5 years, but you will need about 3-4 years before to do all the engineering, all the sightseeing, all the site design, etc. No? So you have to start with the training program. The other thing is important is that it's a government decision, and in Mexico, all the decisions, or mainly the government decisions, are thought on 6 years. No? That's the government term. No? So if they don't take the decision in this year or next year, would be almost impossible to have a nuclear power plant for the days they're talking about. And something that is very important, we need a very strong regulator. We have lived for many years with a regulator that has accommodated itself to having only one nuclear, and that is already licensed. And if we want to license a new set of nuclear stations, we have to have a very strong regulator. We have to start working on that right now. I may say that Mexico has a good path on nuclear use and the opportunity to develop a solid, reliable, and diverse electrical system. This is the time to go on for nuclear as part of the system and country requirements. Just I hope we should not let this opportunity pass. That's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rafael. That was terrific. Henry, we've heard lots about nuclear. Now tell us about solar. Mega solar, not just micro solar.
Thank you, everyone. What just, there we go. Okay. Thought that was me. My name is Henry Gentner. I'm with a company called Mega Solar. We were established initially just to focus on the Mexican renewable energy market. We now have offices in Costa Rica and Lima. We're very versed in what's going on in Central America as well. But our core business is really focused on Mexico. We are a distributed generation company. What we like to do is solar on the roofs or on the property of our customers. We say techos y terrenos. We do some combined heat and power, energy efficiency upgrades, but we really do try to focus on on-site solar. We really do have the mission to increase what we see as very important environmentally sustainable energy technologies. And I think that's important. I want to speak to that in a second. But I don't know if you remember, in 2008, Gallup did a poll in Mexico. 70% of Mexicans are aware of global warming. They believe that it's a threat and that it's human caused. In July, the Pew Center just released a poll wherein Mexicans felt that the #1 global security threat was not ISIS. It wasn't Vladimir Putin taking his shirt off. It was global warming and climate change. This bodes well for the idea that Mexico can begin to construct policies that are supported by what would seem to be a strong Mexican interest and concern for cleaner energy and environmental policies.
I don't know what's going on.
It keeps going?
Yeah, it just seems to be
Can we go back?
animating itself.
Can we get back to...
We
Okay, now we'll go back a second. No?
Just tell us what you want to advance, Henry. Yeah.
So this is not the correct slide, however. Go back to Mexico solar market history. There we go. So there is most definitely, and by the way, I'm speaking to you as someone who's on the ground with our team, quite frankly, commercializing this. We're selling stuff. And we're getting very good response and information and intelligence from business owners. We're mostly focused on commercial and industrial, who are very interested in solar energy. The sector to this point has been one wherein if you own a business, you would buy your solar energy system in cash. Usually those transactions are lubricated via local debt. People go to the bank. And we right now are well aware of many systems being installed at 100 kilowatt, 200 kilowatt, 500 kilowatt that are being paid for in cash using debt. However, that said, there's really very little on-site distributed generation happening in Mexico. The estimated market penetration is less than 100 megawatts at this point. A lot of that is concentrated either in Mexico City or up in the Baja region. By comparison, San Diego has 250 megawatts. So there's a lot of room to grow in Mexico. And I'm going to bring up some issues in a moment, but I do want to express we are extremely enthusiastic about Mexico and the Mexican solar energy market, but there are some things that have to be addressed there. As many of you probably know, over historical 10 years, say, period, the price of electricity in Mexico increased by about 10% a year. The last 12 months, and perhaps some folks who are a bit more versed in policy can explain why. I'd rather not wade into the reasons, but it's been a very volatile market in Mexico with drops in electricity and rises in electricity. I can tell you over the last month, we're getting calls because in certain places the price of electricity has actually risen, and we expect it to continue to do so. But progressive businesses and business owners of all types. We talk to maquiladoras, retail entities, warehouses, all kinds of folks are very interested in solar because they see it as a hedge against volatility, and the volatility that, frankly, they've lived with forever. We see this as really being a sector that's going to take off. What we do is third-party finance projects for the most part. And if you're not aware of what that is, that's something called a power purchase agreement, wherein the person allows their property to have the solar on it, and then they don't own the system, they actually pay for the electricity of the system, and that system is owned by someone else. This is also done through solar lease agreements, which are very similar in structure. The value proposition for customers is pretty basic. It's zero investment, just open up your space and we'll install the system. Immediate savings, energy certainty, certidumbre, increased property value, and environmental sustainability. We can tell you that the number one reason people are doing it is certidumbre. I don't want you to think, however, that is meaning that environmental reasons are not important to people. And I will tell you that environmental reasons are spoken to and spoken about in Mexico, whereas developers don't really even speak to that in the United States because for some reason it's a hot button issue. So you actually leave it off the table. But in Mexico, we do get questions saying, well, what'll this do? What does this mean from an environmental perspective? Which is heartening. The challenges in Mexico, though, are really interesting, very basic, and really speak to the fact that this is an emerging sector in an emerging market. There's very low familiarity with solar in Mexico overall, and how it works, how to buy it, how to use it, what it means. But that's no different, frankly, from if people are buying it in Connecticut. You still get the same basic questions. How well does it work at night? Well, you have to handle that question. There's also very low experience with sophisticated financing methods like power purchase agreements and lease agreements. There's also, in Latin America overall, and especially in Mexico, a distaste for long-term contracts. People like to buy stuff. My family, they save up, they buy the cinder blocks and the bricks, and then they pay somebody to make their home. That mortgages are not something that people maybe take to naturally. The use of debt and the idea that the system is yours is something that we're overcoming from a market education standpoint. At the market level, there is policy uncertainty and regulatory uncertainty. And I'm going to speak to that on the next slide, actually. Before I go into that, the overwhelming, I think, issue overall in Mexico is that it's been said that capital is a coward. It's very powerful, but it's a coward. And capital will not go into Mexico as strongly as some of us might want until it's a less opaque market and until the powers that be really do begin to instill a degree of stability in the market. So we could have very strong interest in Mexico, in renewables overall. But the resource for renewable energy, for solar, is not sunshine. Sunshine's free. It's money. And I'll wave the green flag and be biased for a moment, but coal and other hydrocarbons are really things that you go to a poor place and you pay poor people a very little amount of money, and the resource is essentially as inexpensive as you can get it. To compete against that, we need less expensive money, and to have less expensive money, we need stability in the market. And so going forward, we really feel CFE has been a great partner. They're doing really interesting things in distributed generation. But there's lots of growing pains to come, and that's no different than in the United States. We have 50 little countries here, and what's going on in Massachusetts is completely different than from what's happening in Nevada, say, or something, Texas. We have to keep in mind that while there's a lot of press about people making moves into Mexico, the Mexican market is essentially about the size of, economically, as Texas. So it has great potential, but it has a long way to go. And while you might have the solar resource, like where my family lives in Coahuila, they're norteños, they're in Saltillo and Torreon, they in Coahuila are a coal state. And so they have a lot of sunshine and a lot of coal. It's like Arizona and Virginia having a baby. and no matter how much sun you have, you may not have a solar market until you begin to include the externalities of hydrocarbons and the cost of people getting asthma and all these other things that I would argue for that begin to levelize a bit the market. So in sum, I would also say that the modern solar market and wind market really in the United States is about 12 years old. I hearken it back to about the launch of Sun Edison. And we're still getting utility pushback, regional tensions, policy shifts. It's unsettled. It's still evolving. And we're very much at the very beginning in Mexico. So I would say great interest. Projects are beginning to happen. Money is beginning to flow. But there's still a lot to be done and a lot to be figured out before that market really hits the ground running. And we do see it as a true competitor in the space. That's pretty much it.
Great. Oh, sorry.
We'll let it go.
I was watching the numbers there. We had two more slides. Thank you, Henry, for a great presentation, and also for using my favorite Spanish word, certidumbre. Seems más certidumbre es necesario.
I got it in just under that alarm.
And you did. You did. And that leaves us with John from that tiny little company of GE. Please.
Great. And GE attention span is pretty quick, so I will not take the whole 10 minutes.
Good.
We're usually like a 2-3 minute. If you can't get it out, you get shut down pretty quickly. But I'm on the strategy team for our power and water business, which is GE's largest industrial business, getting bigger hopefully in the next month or so officially with our pending purchase of Alstom. That'll be the biggest acquisition in GE's history, so we're extremely excited about that. I'm based up in Schenectady, but our team is global. We have folks all around the world, and we spend a lot of time with our customers talking about the global trends that are shaping power, and then have an amazing internal debates. So diverse portfolio, everything from gas turbines to wind to nuclear to reciprocating engines and everything in between. So, a lot of times our team is the sounding board where a business might bring their assumptions and we say, no, that's not true. The levelized cost of electricity is this, especially in this location. And did you think about this capacity factor? So a lot of times we're hopefully the voice of reason and truth. But as was said earlier, with our forecasts and assumptions, we are always learning and adjusting things in real time. So what I thought I'd do today was share some of our key trends that we're seeing that are very applicable globally, but also really important here in North America. So we've talked about it a lot this morning, but age of gas. This is absolutely a huge differentiator for North America. If you look at unconventionals, the supply since 2008 is up 4x, if not more, depending on which study you read and in the latest and greatest. Why that is so important, when you go around the world and you look at the availability of different fuel options, it's such an advantage for us here in the U.S., in Mexico and Canada, and whether it be Southeast Asia, I mean, you name the country, not everybody has that advantage. And you look at the cost, the implications on the cost advantage of being able to have access to gas, and it's huge. So that's something that we talk about. The age of gas is here. It's real. We believe that it's already started to fuel an industrial renaissance here in the U.S. and North America, and we think that'll continue. Mainstream renewables. I mean, Henry did a great job. I've been in the power business for about 10 years, and I remember when I was in business school and talking about wanting to get a job in clean tech and renewable energy. And people are like, you can get jobs in that? Are you sure you're going to get hired by anyone? Who's talking about that stuff? And now the amazing thing that it is truly mainstream. I mean, people still knock it for being intermittent, but when you talk about wind, when you talk about utility scale solar, these are real power plants that do really well with in complement to other technologies. And so when we think about ideal portfolios, you need a mix of everything, and so much of it is location dependent in terms of the performance of that technology, but people are still incredibly surprised when you talk about the cost of these technologies. It's not something that countries can't afford. These are real technologies that people are installing today at competitive prices when you look at the mix in terms of other available technologies. So it is whether it be Mexico, whether it be Brazil, you name the country, there's heated debates on what's the lowest cost form of electricity. So it's real. It's not something that's going to happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It's happening right now. And the other thing to debate there too is just, when you look at the all-in cost of electricity, just the wholesale markets versus this distributed side of the grid. And we're seeing advancements on both sides and paying attention there. And one of the things that we think is really important, it's not one size fits all. Again, it's going to take centralized solutions, but also distributed solutions. We have a pretty robust grid here in the U.S. that definitely needs to be upgraded. But you think about different countries around the world that don't have that grid, and a lot of times distributed solutions are the first ones that get installed. Fast-growing markets, I mean, we've talked a lot about Mexico today, but so much, I mean, I think people that you talk to in the U.S. or maybe Europe can say, well, electricity markets, they're kind of flat, they're not growing that fast. Electricity and power and energy is fundamental to economic growth, and we see so much of the growth going on globally, but you look at that 4x rate of developed countries. I mean, people can't get power fast enough. A lot of times we'll have customers around the world that say, hey, I need 4 gigawatts of power in 4 months. Can you do that? That's my number one priority. And that's a big responsibility for us, but it's also a big opportunity. Other thing just to hit on is brilliant machines. I mean, one of the easiest solutions and opportunities we all have is just to upgrade the installed base that we already have. And whether that be through data analytics, software, having machines talk to each other, there is an incredible amount of opportunity there, and we're only getting better. And it starts with, understanding how machines and assets are operating, whether they be a combined cycle gas turbine, whether it be a wind farm. I mean, you name the technology, and you take that information, and what do you do with it? You can use that info to, either change the parameters of those machines so they perform better in that existing site, or you can talk about predictive maintenance, and you just start to make repairs before something even breaks. So we talk about brilliant machines all the time being a huge opportunity in terms of upgrading, our installed base around the world. And then finally, energy efficiency. This is something that impacts us all as individuals in our homes every day, but also commercial customers and industrial customers. Energy is a controllable cost, and there's a lot of simple things that we can do to conserve and save energy, whether that be as simple as changing a light bulb, upgrading your appliances. And then you just think of all the software options that are out there that a lot of them are behavioral. Sometimes you don't really even have to change your behaviors to save a lot of energy. So energy efficiency, we see as a huge growing trend. And then most importantly, I hit it on the bottom, but what governments and countries care about around the world and our customers care about is, can you continue to provide safe, reliable, cleaner power? And again, it's been hammered home this morning, but it's so fundamental to the growth of any economy. The next thing I thought I'd do is just share a couple stories why we're so excited about what's going on today in terms of technology investment and what we see going forward over the next decade. So, the innovation never stops. If you asked someone at GE maybe 5 or 6 years ago, how much more do you plan on investing in your gas turbine? They probably would have been pretty surprised to say someone last year that would go up to them and say at least $2 billion. Can we get any more production out of our machines? Can we improve the efficiency? And efficiency matters. So our latest machine, and the amazing things you can do with it. So the upgrade from this machine versus the last one, the fuel savings per year for a customer is $8 million. So you look at a country like Mexico that wants to provide the lowest cost of electricity solutions to their customers and to their people. $8 million a year for one plant is a big deal. And that's why efficiency matters so much on the wholesale side. Renewables, we talked about the improving economics. One of the cool things we're doing in terms of wind farms, we call it the digital wind farm. So before a wind farm is even built, we take a site and look at the different siting options, look at how the wind works in that specific location. Think about the different options of turbines, and optimize it at a farm level, and run all kinds of simulations, and then come up with the best layout, the best machines for that site. And what we're seeing is when you combine that and then adjust the parameters in real time when you get the data, the energy from that one wind farm alone can be as much as 20% more versus kind of old design. So that's a big deal in terms of real economic benefits. Distributed solutions, power at the point of use, whether it be industrials who, you think about maybe a manufacturing plant where if their electricity goes down, the lost revenue, the lost production, it's too much of an economic risk sometimes for them just to rely on the grid. So a lot of times they want backup power or power on site. And it makes tremendous economic sense in a lot of cases. Combined heat and power, efficiency can be as high as 90%. You look at places like hospitals that can use the steam, industrials that can use the steam. So those point of use solutions, we see more growth there than ever before. And I hit on it before, but potential infrastructure. Again, at GE, we've focused so much on efficiency of equipment that generates electrons and servicing that equipment. And the world spends $400 billion a year on that equipment and servicing that equipment. But I think what amazes people is how much we all spend downstream on electricity. 3 trillion, depending on your estimate, it could be high as 5 trillion. And you look at the inefficiencies of the whole system and how much opportunity for us to work together to improve those inefficiencies. And whether, again, I mentioned it before, but software, data analytics, it's how everything talks together. And we have a long way to go, but there's huge opportunity for us there in terms of the future of power. So that's something that we're incredibly excited about. So again, as I mentioned before, a lot of these breakthroughs and evolutions are happening right here in North America, whether it be Mexico with the energy reforms, whether it be New York with the reforming the energy vision. I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening in our own backyard. So thanks.
Well, thank you. Although I have to say, I'm very, very troubled by this panel, especially John. You were just altogether too positive. The world is an exciting and beautiful place. And here at the Wilson Center, and the Canada Institute in particular, we are oriented towards problems and problems that need solutions. So I want to go back, before we open it up to questions, I want to go back through the panel, and I just want you, if you can, to drill down on some of the things that you think that governments, either at the national or at the trilateral or bilateral level, could help you out with. What are some of the regulatory or policy initiatives that would help you out on your road to tomorrow, but also in terms of making sure that North America is ahead of its competitors in the world? And I'm going to start with cheerful John.
Yeah. So this is maybe something that's relevant in multiple countries around the world, but when we look at the economics of either installing new power or upgrading existing power, the fundamental financials, what's the cost of debt? What's the cost of equity? So the more governments can give certainty around, whether that be through different institutions, it's critical. It prevents growth and development. And again, it could be upgrading an existing asset. You look at India. I mean, one of the things India is so bullish on, they want to do 100 gigawatts a year of wind and solar. But if you look at the cost of debt in India, it's prohibitive from making that happen. You can't get the financiers to back that up. Mexico, for example, when Mexico is thinking about their energy reforms, how they structure those PPAs, what currency will those PPAs be based on? Those are some of the things that we need to pay attention to and have more certainty around.
Great, thank you. I'm from the government. I'm here to help, Henry. What do you need?
Well, actually, I saved my last slide. Would you mind can you bring it up? Yeah. So my last slide really speaks to what John's mentioning, and that's that we need to settle the market, as I said earlier, in Mexico, and convince international and institutional investors that Mexico is a stable. That Mexico is a stable and investable market. We need tariff confidence, and maybe I'll throw a brick through a window here, but stop manipulating the rates in Mexico. Get to something that we all understand is transparent and stable and predictable. And based on reality and not politics and power plays. There are some outstanding issues in Mexico that folks need to get some sense of, which include where the green certificates at. That's very important to us. Clarify tax breaks. One day to another, there's tax breaks if you install solar, for instance, on your payroll taxes and your water tariffs. Yes, no, it's hard to get the right answer. To CFE's credit, there's going to be some more sophisticated engineering requirements for DG in Mexico. When is that coming? What does that look like? Very basic tactical, technical things going on that we need answers to. Remove obstacles, create pathways. This reform and renewables, everything else is going to be great for Mexico. And I think this needs to be framed really, top to bottom in the country that this is, developmentally, it could not be a better time for Mexico to settle these things. It's going to be good for the individual, it's going to be good for the business, and it's going to be good for the nation. So let's go, let's roll. It's a lot of talking now. Let's settle some of these things.
Thank you. Rafael.
Well, I think the reforms in Mexico are very broad, and most of the things that they are talking about, they are there already. The timing that I think cannot done faster. I think what they are doing, if my concern, I don't work for the government anymore, so my concern is that they are going too fast. And probably everybody wants to be certain that everything is what they want, and that's impossible, no? I think an enterprise works in uncertainties. If everything has to be certain, then you don't need entrepreneurs, you need, I don't know, but never is going to be something that is totally certain. We don't know what the price of the gas is going to be, not next year, no, tomorrow, no. So there are not there's not certainties in anything, and I think the things are there in the reform. The green certificates are there. The cost of the electricity is going to be transparent as soon as the electric market opens, and the subsidies are going to be for now very clear and not hidden but open how much subsidy are being provided. If you want to have a market, an electric market that works. No? So I think for the Mexican overall electric market, I think things are very clear and the R&D reform. The timing, as I say, I think is nothing can be done fast. I was talking to him that one of the reform is done based at considering that there is no people. No? But when you think that the Pemex company has around 160,000 employees, and the electric company has about 80,000 employees, when you want to change something, you want to think that there's a lot of people behind with interest and with concerns and with needs that you have to take care of. So you can go fast, but not fast enough for
you
what
can go
people
fast
want.
or you can go well, but you
Yeah.
can't go fast and well. Patrick.
I'd echo and build on a lot of the themes that the other panelists shared. I think one recurring theme and thread of conversation in this panel is that one thing that the three Amigo countries have in common is the politicization of energy and electricity. And it may be an oxymoron, but there needs to be the political will to remove politics from how you build, how you plan, and how you operate the electricity system. So a recurring ask and recommendation from our association has been having that policy, that regulatory environment that's conducive to the kind of long-term investments that you need for electricity, whether you're talking about centralized or distributed generation. Would echo the themes around stability and certainty in that regard. And maybe just to borrow the metaphor of throwing a brick through a window, one means that CEA does see to help achieve policy certainty and stability is coming to a consensus on what to do about carbon reduction. How you're going to tackle it, how you're going to price it. We are an industry association that is on the record supporting a carbon price. We believe it should be economy-wide, North America-wide, and that could really send a very powerful, effective signal to kind of get us to a place where there's greater certainty and stability to make these kind of investments.
Great, thanks. Do we have time for a question, Duncan? You're the boss. Okay, we'll take 3 questions in a row, and my group will deal with them as they come. Gentleman there, gentleman in the back row, and the lady with her hand up, please.
Thank you. My name is Gerardo Velasco. One question, I mean, it could be related with Henry, with your presentation. Regarding the solar energy in Mexico, what do you think that is the levelized cost of energy of solar compared to gas or to other, I don't know, to other source like diesel or I mean, those are not renewables. I mean, diesel or gas, and this is related with what John was saying. I mean, what do you think that is going to be the WACC or the rate that it should be, or what the market should have in order to have this infrastructure for the future? I mean, to rely on renewable energy. Yep, thanks.
Thank you. And then the lady who's freezing in the air conditioning. And I apologize on behalf of the Wilson Center. We like to chill you. You can hang meat in here.
It's all right. My name is Marina Yachnis, and I have a question for Henry about the Mexican solar market. So you were talking about the cost of capital and sort of, de-risking the market. So as far as foreign investors are concerned, when you speak to them, do you find there to be a disparity between perceived risk and actual risk in the Mexican market? And if so, in what area is that disparity sort of highest? Is it regulatory risk, price risk, whatever it may be? And I also have the same question for Mexican, local financial institutions, commercial banks, and so forth. And the second question I have is you discussed the C&I market pretty broadly. What's the outlook for the utility scale solar market in Mexico? And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the gentleman with the, looks like a lavender tie from here. It's very handsome.
Lavender, I guess. So my question originally was on wheeling, which I think would apply to generally any technology, but it's one of the principal mechanisms that you run into in Latin America, and particularly Central America, for getting power that's distributed to specific customers, just the way the PPPs are, or the PPAs are structured. So I've worked in Panama, Costa Rica, and Colombia on this. I'm curious, what are the hurdles you've run into in Mexico? And that's really my only question. And God bless you if you can succeed in Costa Rica. That is a real challenge.
Thank you.
We should talk.
Okay, so we have a list of questions.
Do you want to do the beginning of that cost of energy one a second? Or you want to just go ahead and...
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the LCOE as solar. Again, it's site specific, but solar radiance in Mexico is pretty good. You know, and just range wise, I don't want to. I'll let you take it because you
Okay.
look at the daily economics.
So I'll see if I captured this correctly.
And then I'll call your bluff.
Sure. Well, the LCOE in Mexico is a hard thing to pin down. Again, people forget it's a really big country, and generation in Mexico is done at a lot of different places. And so, you know, we would no more talk about LCOE in Staten Island versus as being equal to San Francisco in the States, right? Mexico has great information. It's a very developed country in terms of its statistics and information, but it's still kind of hard to pull down exactly where we're at in the moment. You know, fossils are cheap, and it's definitely a competitive issue for anyone not, you know, in that business. And so, but you know, if you track what's happened in the U.S., you know, the cost of solar, you know, whether, again, we have to separate out grid projects versus DG projects, and then wind and solar being what they are. But we're getting very, very close to being, you know, at grid parity for a lot of what we do. Mexico will be no different. Related, kind of back up to the utility scale question, just because we're kind of on that. One of my other colleagues is really the one who's really focused on wheeling and in utility scale stuff, but I can tell you that, you know, the Mexican market really did begin to take off in solar with the utility scale, big grid scale projects. Some of those projects petered out, some of them have happened. It's an ebb and a flow in that market. It's very strong. It's going to continue to be stronger. There are people signing, you know, very good sized contracts. A lot of this is happening north of the Tropic of Cancer, a lot in Sonora. It's going to be a market that continues to grow. Wheeling in and of itself in Mexico, we had heard that there was going to be an increase in tariffs on people who wanted to wheel stuff in Mexico, which is going to kill some of the wind things that were farther down the line. You know, in Oaxaca, there's a lot of wind, not a lot of off-takers. So then what do you do with all that power? I mean, maybe there's monkeys and trees with TVs, but you know, you have to begin to look at this market as more than a vanity project and start to get real about where you're going to site electricity projects and who's going to use them. And that's coming. When it comes to the discrepancy, you know, we like to say there are the meetings where you're talking to people who are kind of just fishing around, and then you're talking to the people, you know, the serious guys in suits and ties. And they're in New York, they're in San Francisco, they're in London, they're in Mexico City. And the money that is not in Latin America is interested, but they want to be first to be second. And so we do a lot of presentations to folks who respect Mexico, they're learning more about the market, but they're staying on the sidelines for a sec. There are folks who are more immediately interested, and we wouldn't be doing what we're doing if they didn't exist. But I can tell you that a lot of the interest is coming from Latin American money and people in Mexico City, people in Colombia, who perhaps understand better how to navigate the ups and downs of again, emerging sector in an emerging market. But that discrepancy, some of it is just perceived. I mean, folks who've just quite frankly never been on a plane to Mexico. And they're coming at it with perhaps some biases that they shouldn't. But there's less and less of that as the market moves forward. And we've been really focused on Mexico for about 24 months. We feel we got in really early to learn the laws and find out what's going on. And that change over that period of time has been really amazing as people really come to the idea that this is going to be a real market.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, we did a study on a 25 megawatt solar plant in
Sinaloa. And it was very, very competitive with, that was about 2 years ago. It was very competitive with wind. And the project stopped because we started to talk about the electrical reform, and the transmission cost was not very clear. And I think it's going to be clear now. No? In the past, the transmission cost was almost free, and that's what that makes solar and wind very, very competitive. But if you put some real transmission cost, then competitiveness is not as clear as is now. No? So I hope by next year the transmission cost will be very clear, and then the studies for solar and wind will be easier and clear to do.
Great. And with that, we are first to be second. It's a terrific expression. All right, so I guess we're going to wrap it up now. So first of all, join me in thanking this wonderful panel. And then I'm going to start to say some thank you, and then Duncan will come up and say the rest of the thank yous. How's that? All right. So first of all, I would like to thank all of you who came here today, and all of you who are watching us online. I've been getting tweets from people all over. Toronto is very interested in us. If you are following live, you can come back to our webinar later. We store it all in the digital annals of time, so you can see this over and over and over again if you want. Let me also thank our sponsor, Enbridge, a large North American energy distribution company. While I'm thanking them, let me also say I've noticed a number of the Friends of the Mexico Institute, Friends of the Canada Institute, our corporate partners. We really appreciate your continuing support in its many forms. Without you, we can't continue to do what we do. And I will say thank you to my friends at the Mexico Institute and to Duncan, who's going to come up and say the rest of the thank yous, to the entire team that put this together, and our gang at the Canada Institute.
Thank you. Yes, very much appreciate you guys staying with us to the sweet end. I won't say the bitter end. I would particularly like to thank John Renahan for coming back again. We used you and abused you last year, and you came back for more. So thank you very much. So you are cordially invited again next year. It was a terrific forum here today. Particular thanks I'd like to extend to Angela Budzinski and to Andrew Finn for their efforts they put in here, of course to Victoria Dagley, and all of the interns in both Canada and Mexico Institutes who of course do everything behind the scenes and in front of the scenes when there are computer issues, because Henry brought some kind of virus into the Wilson Center which will destroy everything.
Don't use the elevator.
Exactly. But anyway, thank you very much for your attendance, and hope to see you here soon again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, good job. Hey, you must have worked with Marco. Marco Capellas? Yeah. At Pegasus, right?
I would have liked to have
Yeah, we have
hour.
friends in common.
Okay.
Yeah.